Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text 13. Mukam koroti vachalam mangam langayate gidim yat pripadatam bande Sri Gurunjina tadanam. A few verses ahead, Lord Krishna says, Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. That because this material body doesn't last, therefore it is not real. And because the soul is ever existent, it is not born, it does not die. Therefore, that is the real self. So here, in tonight's verse, the Lord is describing how this body is changing. We can remember, as this verse says, that we were once all, each of us, Kumara or Kumari, that means little child, little boy or little girl. Probably all of you have some photo of when you were a small child. So that form of the body is no longer existent. Therefore, it is not real. So also, next stage, Yovana, to be youth. That means newly matured young person, 18, 19 years old. So some of you are at that age. For some of you, that age has passed also. And for all of you, it will pass. And then there's Jara, old age. And this will also pass. The body will one day cease to exist. That means it never really existed. Not that it is a dream, but it is not ourself. What is asad, what is unreal, is that we take this to be ourselves. Now actually, as this body is changing, we don't really notice. And we are actually thinking that we will live forever. So this is a hint of the real position of the self. You see, actually it's a fact. We don't change. We don't go from childhood to youth to old age. And we will not die. But you have to be on the spiritual platform to understand this, to realize this. When one has this intuition that I will not die, but is identifying with the body as the self, that's called Maya. That means the sense of the eternal is misplaced.
И това значи, че място, което ви отразява, трябва да вземе тялото, то е изместено.
The example is given of the moon in the sky, reflected upon the waves of an ocean. It's a very beautiful image. Everyone can think in their mind. This nice scene. Moon reflected on the waves of the ocean. So the moon in the sky, that is the real moon. It is transcendental. The moon on the water is not real. Although it still looks beautiful. We find it attractive. But it is not real, and also because it is on the water, it is always changing. And so the same is with the self. The self is transcendental, but it is reflected on the ever-changing surface of matter. And if we are attracted to that reflection, now you might ask, why would we be attracted to the reflection? Because it may seem closer to us. It may seem easier to obtain if one is lazy. Just like, the other example is of the tree reflected in the water of a flowing river. So one may be sitting underneath the tree, and one may be seeing the tree before him in the water, the tree on the bank of the water, of the river. And this tree has fruits. So he sees the fruits in the water. So these fruits in the water seem to be very much closer and easier to get than the fruits up there. So if one's desire to taste fruit are so strong, and at the same time he's very lazy, then meditating on this fruit in the water may bewilder him, that he thinks, I will just pick these fruits. But if he does that, he will fall in the water. So in some such way like that, we have fallen into this material world. Being spiritually lazy. And thinking that the reflection of enjoyment is easier to enjoy than the actual transcendental reality. So we are absorbed in this body because there is activity, there is relationship. There is some appearance of enjoyment. But again, it is not real. And we have by misplacing our identity, thinking I am this body. Now we think the body is real and it will last forever. And this is Maya. You see? So the problem is that we are devoid of spiritual activity and spiritual relationship.
Проблемът е, че ние сме лишени от духовни дейности.
You see, spiritually we are empty.
Духовно ние сме правени.
And that emptiness has become full now with this illusion.
И тази празнота се запълва от тази илюзия.
Srila Prabhupada gave the example of a cup. It's a very simple example. Example of a cup. So now this cup of the mind or consciousness, is full with ink. See? We want the cup to have something in it. And the closest thing available is ink, so we put ink in there. But ink is not very nice to drink. So, then the Prabhupada explains, he mentions here the Mayavadis. So they become disgusted with trying to drink ink. And so they pour the ink out of the cup. The cup is empty again. But an empty cup is asking to be filled. And so if there's nothing else, no other liquid around except ink, then again ink will go in this cup. So Srila Prabhupada said the actual solution is that we have to, yes, empty the cup of ink, but fill the cup with milk. Then who cares for ink anymore? So similarly, the only reason that we find this body and this embodied life so fascinating is because otherwise we are empty. So we have to fill the cup of the mind or the heart with the milk of Krishna consciousness. With the milk of Lord Krishna's name, form, qualities and activities. And when the heart is full of Krishna consciousness, then one can very clearly understand, I am not the body. But to the degree that the heart is not full of Krishna consciousness, to that degree this understanding becomes more and more difficult. So in this age, the method to fill the heart with Krishna consciousness is very simple yet very powerful. You know this process very well. It is the process of chanting the holy name of the Lord and living our whole life in such a way as to strengthen that chanting. One can chant, but if one's life is still anchored in the bodily concept, then the attraction to the chanting, the determination to chant purely will be weak. So when we use this term, to be anchored in the bodily concept, it means to not be free of meat eating or illicit sex or gambling, intoxication. Mm-hmm. And so to become free of these four bad habits, then one needs to change his life, live in the association of devotees. This body must associate just to live. You see, we have to perform activities to maintain this body, and that requires us to associate with others. Just like to eat, you have to go to the market. Mm-hmm. So with every desire, you'll see it requires us to interact with other people. A society is just an arrangement of people for satisfying desires. But people who are in the bodily concept of life, then they're trying to satisfy material desires. So to the degree that we associate with those kind of people, and to the degree we will also have material desires. So this circle of devotees, the society of devotees, is dedicated to satisfying spiritual desires. Satisfying the desires of the soul. Now if you satisfy the desires of the soul, then the desires of the body are automatically taken care of. Think back on the example of the moon and the reflection. See, if you look at the beautiful moon in the sky, then you're not missing anything down below. You're actually you're appreciating the real form of yourself. So the activities of Krishna consciousness, centered on the chanting of the holy name, which means gathering together to chant and dance before the deity, and to accept Krishna prasadam offered to the deity, to discuss the transcendental subject matter of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, to also go forth into the world and spread these subjects by preaching, by book distribution. These activities satisfy the spiritual desire, desires of the real self. And then automatically the needs of the body are included. And the needs of the body will not conflict with these spiritual activities. Because the heart is full. You see, that's the secret. Again, to the degree that the heart is low in love of God, to that degree material desires will enter and causes trouble, causes conflict.
желание ще ги види след теб и ще предизвикат конфликт.
So when that conflict becomes too disturbing, one is separated from himself.
Когато този конфликт е много безпокояващ, всъщност ние сме разделени от истинското себе.
Sinful activities means activities which are not yourself.
Греховни дейности означават такива дейности, които не са извършени от самите нас.
This in etymology.
Това е етимология.
At least in English, I don't know about Bulgarian, but I can't. But in English language, we have this word sin. With sin in English, which is related. Like in German, they say Sund for the same thing, and so in English there's also a word Sunder, which means separated, like Jarasandha, you know. And then it comes from Sanskrit, Sanutar, which means to divide. So the idea is that it's simple, that sin divides us from ourselves. Yes, so you become someone else by sinful activities. You've heard of this one famous story called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You've heard of that? It's a pretty famous story. So Dr. Jekyll was a nice man, living in London. He was some professor researching in science. And he developed a preparation which he would drink at night, and it would turn him into a very evil person named Mr. Hyde. Yes, and this Mr. Hyde would go out at night and beat people and do all kinds of bad things. So similarly, our material identity, it is a kind of, yes, it is like that. It is it is an identity that is actually different, separate from our real self. And it exists because our desires are divided from ourself. So, therefore, we have to fill up our heart with Krishna consciousness, so that all of our desires will be engaged in the service of Lord Krishna. And then this material identity, of course it goes on existing for as long as the body lives, but it will not be out of harmony with the real self. This is real oneness, by the way. The Mayavadis and mental speculators, they have all their strange ideas of oneness. But oneness is very easy to understand. That there is no disharmony
between ourself and our desires.